A German tank commander peers through his binoculars across a flat Ukrainian steppe. Nothing. Just fields. A collapsed fence. A pile of old straw near an abandoned barn. He orders the column forward. Then the straw explodes. Not figuratively. The entire mass erupts. Gun barrel swinging, crew rising, muzzle flash cutting the morning air. A Soviet 45mm anti-tank gun had been sitting there for 6 hours, invisible, waiting, and the German tank never saw it coming. Here's what most people don't understand about World War II anti-tank guns. The engineers who designed them weren't just solving a ballistics problem, they were solving a visibility problem. Because the most lethal anti-tank gun in the world is useless if it's spotted first. And on the flat, treeless steppes of Eastern Europe, where you can see for 3 miles in any direction, hiding a gun that weighs over 1,400 kilograms sounds nearly impossible. So how did they do it? The answer involves earth tone paint orders signed at the highest levels of Soviet command, a design feature built directly into the gun shield that most historians still overlook, an entire doctrine of military deception that German commanders called superior to their own, and a single battle where it all came together so completely that 200 guns per mile simply ceased to exist until the moment they opened fire. Welcome to World War II objects, where every object tells a story. Let's go back to the summer of 1941. Germany launches Operation Barbarossa on June 22nd. Within weeks, Soviet forces are in chaotic retreat across hundreds of miles of open farmland, in forest and flat steppe, and Soviet commanders are discovering a brutal, recurring reality. Their anti-tank guns keep dying before they fire a single shot. The problem wasn't the guns themselves. The Soviet 45mm M1937, weighing 560 kilograms with a 2.07-meter barrel, was perfectly capable of penetrating German armour at close range. The ZIS-2, introduced that same year with a 57mm caliber and a crew of 6, was even more lethal against the newest German designs. These were sound, functional, well-engineered weapons. The problem was their silhouette. Think of it like a sail on a ship. A sail is only dangerous when the wind fills it, but a sail catches the eye from miles away. It announces its presence before it can do anything useful. An anti-tank gun operates on exactly the same principle. The moment enemy reconnaissance spots it, it stops being a weapon and becomes a target. On open farmland, a gun shield standing 1.25 meters tall against a flat horizon might as well be a billboard with an arrow pointing down. And it wasn't just ground-level observation. By 1941, both sides had sophisticated aerial reconnaissance. A German Focke-Wulf FW-189 observation aircraft could photograph a 10-kilometre stretch of front in a single pass. Analysts back at headquarters would study those photographs for geometric shapes that didn't belong. Straight edges, regular shadows, wheel tracks radiating outward from a single point. A towed anti-tank gun, even partially dug in, left exactly those signatures. The wheel tracks alone could give away a position before the crew finished digging their foxholes. The Germans understood this threat well. In a March 1942 Eastern Front field report, compiled from frontline officer observations and later translated by military historians, German commanders noted that Soviet camouflage techniques were, quote, superior to the German ones. They were consistently losing track of guns that should have been visible. Positions were being discovered only after they opened fire. Men were dying because they couldn't find guns that were sitting in open fields. Something deliberate was happening, and it wasn't luck. The Soviets had a word for it, Maskirovka. It translates roughly as masking. But in Soviet military doctrine, it meant something far broader than paint and netting. It meant a total, systematic effort to deny the enemy any accurate picture of where your forces were, what they were doing, and when they intended to act. It's a nowhere Was Maskirovka applied more aggressively or more ingeniously than to the anti-tank gun? But here's the question that gets to the heart of it. How do you hide something that weighs over half a ton in a completely flat, open field with nowhere to hide? Here's what most people don't realize. The Soviets didn't actually try to make their guns invisible. That's the wrong way to think about it. They made their guns look like things that already belonged in the landscape. On August 7th, 1941, just 6 weeks into Barbarossa, while Soviet forces were still absorbing catastrophic losses, the Soviet Council of People's Commissars issued Order Number 5667. It was a paint order, mandatory, covering every piece of artillery in the Red Army. The order specified a 3-colour camouflage scheme, 4BO olive drab as the base coat, yet with disruptive spots applied in 5K dark brown and 7K yellow earth. Guns, limbers, ammunition crates, tractors, tarps, tents, large cases, everything got painted, not in random colours chosen for aesthetics, in colours chosen to match the specific terrain where Soviet guns would spend most of their time fighting. Yellow earth. Think about what that means for a moment. That's the colour of wheat fields in late August. That's dry steppe grass in October. That's the mud wall of a Ukrainian farmhouse. The Soviets weren't painting their guns to disappear. They were painting them to belong, to look like one more piece of the agricultural landscape that stretched to the horizon in every direction. But paint was only the first layer of the solution. In the 1942 Soviet manual titled Camouflaging Field Positions in the Steppes went significantly further. It gave gun crews specific, measurable instructions for building straw masks. Constructed screens of bundled straw placed in front of and around the gun position. The manual was precise. The mask width should be 6 to 8 times the width of the structure being hidden. For a standard gun emplacement, that translated to 12 to 20 metres of straw screen across the front of the position. Not scattered hay tossed loosely around the barrel. A deliberate, dimensioned structure sized specifically to eliminate the shadow lines and geometric edges that aerial photography would catch. Now you might be thinking, doesn't a perfectly rectangular wall of straw look just as suspicious as a gun? And you'd be right to ask that, which is exactly why the manual also specified that the edges should taper toward the ground and blend seamlessly into the surrounding terrain. Gun crews weren't building walls, they were building the appearance of fields. The straw wasn't concealing a weapon, it was extending the landscape over it. Here's the engineering principle that makes this remarkable. Imagine you're painting a room and you want to make it look larger than it is. You don't just paint it white, you extend the floor pattern onto the lower portion of the wall so the eye can't find where the floor ends. The Soviet straw mask worked on exactly the same principle. Extend the field pattern over the gun position so the eye can't find where the field ends and the weapon begins. It's not camouflage in the traditional sense. It's environmental mimicry. And there was one more layer. One that's built into the metal of the gun itself. Look closely at a photograph of a Soviet WW2 or a 45mm M 1937. Study the top edge of the gun shield. It isn't straight. It isn't the clean horizontal line you see on most artillery. It's cut in a deliberate wavy irregular pattern, peaks and valleys running along the entire upper edge of the steel plate. Soviet armaments engineers documented this specific design choice in the 1943 artillery course textbook published by Venisdat. That wavy edge was an intentional camouflage feature. Its purpose was to break up the gun shield's most recognizable characteristic, its perfectly straight geometric silhouette, and make it read to a distant observer as a natural rock formation, a ridge of uneven ground, or a low earthen berm. And most Western artillery of the same period had flat, rectangular shields, simple straight edges. The British 6-pounder weighed 1,144 kilograms and had a clean, squared gun shield that stood out sharply against terrain. The German Pak-40, at 1,425 kilograms, 6.2 meters long with its carriage, standing 1.25 meters tall, had a three-plate flat shield introduced specifically to simplify production. Effective weapon, obvious silhouette. The Soviets, by contrast, built the act of disappearing directly into the manufacturing process. Every gun that came off the production line was already harder to see than its Western equivalents. A US Army post-war intelligence report confirmed what German tankers were experiencing in real time. Soviet anti-tank guns were, quote, always excellently camouflaged and turned up even where no German tank attacks might be expected. They weren't just hiding in good positions, they were hiding everywhere, in every kind of terrain, at every time of year. Before we finish, there's one final chapter to this story, and it happened at a scale that still staggers military historians today. By the spring of 1943, Soviet Maskirovka had evolved from improvised field technique into something closer to industrial science. The lessons of 1941 and 1942 had been absorbed, formalized, and scaled up to an almost incomprehensible degree. And the place where all of it was tested, simultaneously and completely, was the Kursk salient in July 1943. German planners had known for months that a major Soviet defensive position was being prepared in the Kursk region, but aerial reconnaissance showed entrenchments, some vehicle movement, supply activity. The Germans knew the Soviets were digging in. What they could not determine, despite weeks of reconnaissance flights and intelligence analysis, was the true scale of what was waiting for them. The reason was Maskirovka applied at every level simultaneously. Entire Soviet armies moved only at night. Strict radio silence was enforced during daylight hours. Every vehicle track was raked smooth before dawn. Supply convoys were hidden under netting and natural brush before the sun came up. Engineers dug gun emplacements and then covered them so completely that subsequent aerial photographs showed nothing but undisturbed farmland, straw masks, earth-tone paint, wavy-edged shields pressed flush against the ground, and 200 anti-tank guns per mile of front, not total, per mile, positioned, concealed, and waiting. When German armour finally rolled forward on July 5, 1943, they drove into a defensive belt they couldn't see and couldn't measure. David Glantz, the foremost Western historian of Soviet military operations and author of multiple volumes on the Eastern Front, has described the concealment achieved before Kursk as a defining demonstration of Soviet operational mastery. German commanders had prepared their assault based on intelligence that was fundamentally incomplete. The guns they couldn't find on reconnaissance photographs were the guns that destroyed their attack. The doctrine that started with a paint order in August 1941. Earth-tone colours, straw masks, wavy shield edges, environmental mimicry had, 2 years later, helped engineer one of the most consequential defensive victories of the entire war. So the next time you see a World War II anti-tank gun, that low, angular profile, the wavy edge running along the top of the gun shield, the faded earth-tone paint, you'll understand what you're actually looking at. It's not just a weapon, it's a precisely engineered disappearing act. It's the physical expression of a doctrine that turned open farmland into an invisible killing ground. It's proof that on the deadliest battlefields in human history, the gun that survived longest wasn't always the heaviest or the most powerful. It was the one the enemy never found. Thank you for watching WW2 Objects. If you have suggestions for other WW2 items we should cover, from individual soldier gear to field engineering innovations to artillery design secrets, leave them in the comments below and we'll give you a shout out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story from the battlefield.